Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, so tonight's presentation, uh, there we go, is API architecture that leads to developer success by Adam Broadbent of MadeLabs. And I'm going to hand it off to you, Adam. Thank you very much. Looking forward to this.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and share my screen. I unmuted, so hopefully everyone can hear me online if they need to. Yeah.
You're unmuted now, right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So. Cool. Well, thank you guys for everyone coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. A little bit about myself is, try to get to the next slide here. There. A little about me. So 25 years ago, I got my start doing a professional development work really in a group just like this. And I think that's pretty awesome to be able to speak to you guys too, because back then there weren't YouTube videos, it wasn't Pluralsight, there wasn't all these things. And so the way that I learned was like kind of meeting other people, but that's also the way that I got my first job opportunity too. You know, it was just by proving to other people that I knew what I was talking about. So for anyone looking and things like that, junior developers, glad you're here. Yeah, and stuff too. So I think it's really awesome. And since then, I've really kind of wanted to be a part of groups like this because this is how we've also hired some of the best people that I've worked at too, is being able to meet and get to know the people in my community and understand how they can, be a part of what we're building. And then as Nick and I started MadeLabs, this has been an opportunity for us to meet people that could be potential clients too. So it's just these user groups have been like just really positive experience in my life, and so I appreciate you guys having me here and being able to talk to you all. I live really close to Michigan State University, only about like 3 blocks away. So I'm from Michigan, coming in out here for you guys. And I have a wife and 2 kids, 2 daughters, which is they're great and really enjoy it there. I love to barbecue and do home automation. So any other barbecue fans here?
Smoking?
All right. Yep. Yes. All right, good. So I don't have like a heavy barbecue content in here, but I, decided to make that more the topic and stuff. So we'll get into that a little bit too. So.
Are we going to be invited over later?
I would love to. That's the best part of barbecue is sharing it with others, right? So.
We'll start it right when we get there.
Yeah. 12 hours later. That's right.
It's a brisket. It'll cook fast.
So here I am with my Kamado Joe, Big Joe, and my daughter helping out. We're doing a rotisserie chicken on the grill there, so that's part of it. So what we're going to work on tonight is an API for an application that can keep track of our barbecue sessions and take notes while we're going through and barbecuing. Very, very simple form, but we can something as an example to start with as an application that might be fun because I like to barbecue, and then we can use that as an opportunity to learn what are some of the common application development problems maybe that we could solve using architecture and stuff. So that's could be fun, I think. So I wanted to reach out to you guys first and talk a little bit about this in general, because I'm premising a lot of this on bugs, but like what really causes bugs and how do how do common oversights turn into challenges and stuff in your environment and stuff? Do anyone want to speak up to some things that you see in your world that maybe causes bugs?
When you fix something, it breaks something somewhere else.
Yep, absolutely. Totally agree with that. Any other ideas? Distractions, yeah. Data can be, yeah.
Poor specifications.
Yep. Yeah. Requirements, scope creep can, yeah.
I was waiting for somebody to use requirements for sure.
Oh yeah.
Environmental changes.
Oh yeah.
AT&T.
Well, that's awesome. I think the things that we want to cover today are going to be things like this, like forgetting to assign common properties on update cases, being lost in a new code base, maybe even breaking existing code by adding a simple feature. Like you said, adding logging during an outage is probably too late. Yeah, that's right. Accidentally saving data in the wrong fields, and then code complexity grows with new features sometimes and stuff too. So, so hopefully these topics kind of sound interesting to you because we'll get to jump through those and stuff I think too. So. Code. And that's the problem I have. Well, and I guess I want to preface some of these things as like the start of all this is that a lot of time when I think about like an outage that happens or something like that, you'll hear, how can we prevent that outage? And you'll say test form, or something like that, right? And I think that a lot of time it's a lot bigger than that, and a lot of time we can say if you really want to say the code is the problem, but the code isn't always the root cause,
It worked on
right?
my machine.
It could work on your machine. It could be that it was the bad requirements, right? That maybe led to the code not being right. You know, there's a lot of things that come into this. And so it's kind of like a passion of mine is to work with like the companies that we work with to try to help them make the lives of our developers and other people better, because we can try to say how can we make the architecture better. So with that, I want to jump into some of the code with you guys so we can look at this barbecue app that, or API that that we worked on here. So let me cancel this. So here we have a simple N-tier application. So it's, you know, we basically have an API, an application, and the database. So that's just how we're breaking up the solution, stuff like that. I'll go through each of these just so we kind of an overview of what we're starting with. I think one of the big things for me was when just setting up this presentation was trying to decide, you know, should I try to make an error-ridden, awful application that we can go and fix, or should we try to start with something that's like pretty good and see just opportunities to get better? And so I decided to go with the later and try to make it a decent application. But I want to show some of the opportunities where we can just do a little bit better. So, so with this, in the API, we're just using simple controllers, right? We have simple methods like in here, you have like a get all session, notes async, create, update, all the CRUD kind of things that are happening in here. And they're pretty simple methods for the most part. All we're really doing is calling into this like service, like in this case for this being the barbecue session, going in the service and saying like get all barbecue sessions by ID. And then we're just wrapping it, and I think this is like one of these like kind of like good practices and stuff to do, is like you wrap this in a API call in an envelope. And so this is the API results. That when we go in here, this is really simple, but what's nice about having it wrapping in this envelope is that you can help your application, the front end application, know, is this a response I'm getting from my application, or is this just a generic error response that I might be getting, or something like that? And so you can kind of differentiate the two. And so this is real simple, and all it's doing is just we have succeeded, results, and errors as the collections. And then we have these methods that we can pass it, that we can call like success or failure. And that's what you'll see back here.
Hey, can you speak up a little bit? The air conditioner, it's hard for me to hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, we can't figure out how to turn that down.
Yeah. I'm just not good with backup.
Ah.
Yeah.
I'll let you work on
Yeah, Jason punched buttons for a little while, but.
Sorry. This was already me. Wasn't me. It wasn't me.
I like breaking things. This is already broke. Thanks.
I need to just talk about it.
Okay, I'll try. And but these are just our controllers, right? So that's the idea. And we're calling into these services. So in the application, you see here we have folders for common things, DTOs, exceptions, helpers, all these things. And then in the services is where we can get into like that barbecue session service. And you can see we do things here like call into our validation, which is down in here in these validators. And this is something that's kind of interesting to, if anyone hasn't used it before, but this is called fluent validation. And I think it's just really an easy way to kind of, you know, define what you're trying to do. So in a real like easy to read kind of way. So this says rule 4, the description says the minimum length is this configuration from the minimum length, which is just a constant file here, right? And then we can say with this message, and then you can provide the message and stuff like that. So if you haven't used Fluent Validation, that's kind of neat. So we have these set up in these separate files, but you can see in the service that we end up calling that validation and just throwing that an exception if it failed, is the idea on that. These, then it's just going to our repository and getting the data. We're using AutoMapper, which probably a lot of you have used before. It's a common library for that. I have mixed love-hate feelings about it. We'll talk about it a little bit later maybe too, but it's a great library by Jimmy Bogard. And then we do this in the repository. You can say update async and stuff like that's here. And so then I'll show you in the data access, we have basically a repository. And so where the, like for instance, the barbecue session ones, it's only just calling into this base repository because everything that we did here was pretty simple. Another one where I have mixed feelings on, I like repositories when they provide a lot of benefit and help. Sometimes I think they're like an extra layer of abstraction that you don't need. So your mileage may vary, but I decided just for setting this up, it would be good to kind of show how you can make like a base repository if you needed it so you could reuse it, because this uses generics to be able to you know, handle for different entity types and stuff like that. So But that's good. So this is the whole, most of the application. There are a lot more that we could dive into, but I just want to give you a quick overview of the kind of that way it's structured and the way it's set up to start with things. So I'm going to run this just so you can get an idea from we're just going to use the Swagger endpoints and stuff like that in order to use it because I don't have an actual front end for this, so it's just the just the API. But then we'll log in.
Use that password everywhere.
Well, normally it's password, but that's there you go. That's right. So then put this in. And then what we're able to do now is I can go through and I can actually start using that authentication that I just did to actually try the API out in the call. So here I'm going to do this. I'm going to say for our first barbecue session, the intent here is to kind of talk about like what is it that I'm cooking maybe or something like that. So I can say here pastrami for St. Patty's Day or something, right? And then we should get back our ID. So then this is like said that it worked. We got 200 response, which is good. And now I can go in and create session notes. So I just have to change the ID for that. And then I can do this activity description, note, and pit temperature. So I may say like checking the bark or something, right? And I can, and maybe on my note, I'll just say needs another hour. Not dark enough or something. And I'll say that I recorded the pit temperature at 273 or something. And then we got back our response. So that's good. So now what we can do is, because we saved that, we can go to the get endpoint and we can try it out. And oops, I didn't hit execute. There we go. And now this says that we have our pastrami for St. Patrick's Day got saved. By the way, I'm saving this to an in-memory database right now just to make it easy because it will wipe it out every time I run it and stuff like that for these things. But and we've got our I have like a result property which is only done on updates, kind of like where you can log what how did it come out, and keep track of that, or is the intent on that one. But then we have created by, created on, updated by, and updated on. So the created should get updated when you add it, update when it when you make a change. If I go into the notes, I should be able to get back all the notes for that ID. And then I can see checking the bark, needs another 2 hours. And then I say, uh-oh, here the created by and the created on looks like the default date time. So we have a bug in there. So what we'll do is take a look at the services. So for this, we had the under the barbecue session service. We can see here that in this create async, we actually are doing the created by, or setting it to the current user, and the created on. But if I go into the session service and I look at the created by on that one, you see we don't have it there. So one option I could do is I could go into this and I could add that created by and created on to this method. But then the problem is, like, what if I have this missing somewhere else? And I keep having this problem over and over again. So one of the things that we can do is that I can go, I'm just going to copy some code to make it easier to not to type it all in, but what we can do is, the nice thing is you can take advantage of Indy framework, and we can go into the database context for this. And what you see in here is that we just have like on model creating or applying the configurations that are in the assembly and things like that. But what I can do is I can go and I can put in, I didn't copy it right. Try it again. All right. So then what we're doing now is that we're able to override the save changes method. And what we can do is we can loop over everything that's in the change tracker in Indy framework and look for this I audited entity. And so this is just an interface that was applied to these different methods here. So if I go in to look at this one, you see that this session note is an IOT identity, and that means that it has these created on, updated on. So if you had any of these that didn't have those fields, it wouldn't try to populate these, but if you did, it would populate them. And so what's neat about this is that you loop through these, it'll look at the state, and it'll say if it's added, it will go ahead and do the created by and created on. If it was modified, it would do the updated by and updated on, you know. And so that's kind of a nice thing if you think about like the idea that if you're working in a larger code base and you have these kind of fields that you need to keep up to date in your database, you don't want to worry about making sure that, you know, it's up to the developer to add those in. You can do this at a common point and then make sure that that's set for everybody. So kind of a neat thing, I think, to be able to do, because I know I've worked in a lot of places where we had to make sure those were updated, and when I learned about this, it was nice. So, yes?
Is there an assumption here that the user ID will always return valid?
For the purposes of this demo, yes, but I'm sure like you may want to do more like other things. I think like where you know, depends on how your authentication works. If you're having other services, what I do is typically you have like your dependency injection, make sure that it's there, and if it doesn't, you know, if you're using like a method where it's a machine-to-machine call, you put in like some kind of admin ID or something like that kind of thing. That may happen on that. But
Well, not just a model, how you put an annotation that says it's required.
Yep.
And then it will even insert is, can't be wrong.
Sure. Yeah.
Just let it fail.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do that.
You could.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then you won't.
Yeah,
I'd
I'd
rather not write a bunch of code that can then start getting bugs.
Sure.
To account for a situation that people ought not do in the first place.
There you go. Yeah. Absolutely. So anyway, that was pretty fun, you know, thing for me to learn about, at least anyway. So I like that a lot. Next thing I want to do is move this up into the next one over here. Yeah, pretty wild, huh? And then see if I can drag this over. So then what I've done just to save time on this stuff is created another solution that we have here. This one, the next thing I want to show you is if I go and look at this application here, we have all these folders for common DTOs, exceptions, helpers, all these things like that. I heard someone say one time before that if a developer wrote a book, they would have it be chapter 1, characters, chapter 2, plots, chapter 3, you know, romances or something, you know, whatever. But it's the idea that that's how a lot of our applications are built by types, as opposed to what I want to show you over here. Is that what it is? I refactored it. Now you see that we don't have all these folders over there. Now we have common templates and use cases. And then what I have in use cases is things like the barbecue session, the session notes, and the user. So if I go into like the session, I have in there my create barbecue session, get all, update, you know, the update barbecue session. And then I have my like auto mapper profile in there. That's that create map piece. The service right now is in this folder. So before they were spread out where you had services, you had DTOs, you had validation, all those things that were spread out. And so this can be something that's really nice, I think, is being able to have someone, like a new person joining your team or anything like that, can sometimes go and say, what is the thing I'm doing? And they can see right in their one place all the stuff around that. And so I think of these use cases as more like this create barbecue session, get all. And so these are the ones where we have like more uniqueness to it, which is pretty good. You know, I think they're. Does this make sense to everyone? Any questions about the idea of like use cases versus types? It's just been helpful, and I think I'm going to be able to show it a little bit more next because we'll move into like mediator and things like that to see too. But I think this is one that I found that sometimes we've worked at places that it was really hard to find the code that you're working in because you didn't know, you know, a certain bug or something like that, know where to go. So the hope is if you do this by use cases, that's at least in one central area that people might be comfortable with, and then they can dig in to each one of these different options and things that you have there. But I want to take it one step further and show you more about like what we can do with by introducing mediator into this. So here we have the same basic same application. I added a folder here called value objects, but I'll go into that in a minute. But so ignore that. But then in the use cases, if we look back at that barbecue session again, what you can see is there's a lot less files now in the root of this. But if I go into the create barbecue session, there's this new file in here called create barbecue session command. And what I've done with this one, move this over to give you a little more room. This in here, this is what I like to do with Mediator. Well, I should start saying that with Mediator, one of the things it does is it's a way for us to be able to talk to or decouple our API from the application kind of parts, right? And so I'll show you what that means in the controller here. So if I look at one of these, you'll see that we have this. I'll just look at the create or something for now. We have on the create, and then what we had before was an input DTO that was happening there, and then calling into a function, into a method of our service, right? And what we're doing with this one now is that we're having the command be the thing that we're like receiving in, and then we're using mediator send of the command. And so the mediator, what it does is just says send it. It's saying I want to do this, you know, as opposed to call this function, right? So you're saying here's what I want to do. I want to create a barbecue session. Right, and I want it to have this data that is in here. And so the data is this thing, the description, the user ID, and the tenant ID, right? And so that's kind of like you know, all the information that it needs is the point, right? In order to create a barbecue session is the idea. With Mediator, what you have is that every request has a request handler. And so what I do to make it easier is I put them both in the same file. That makes it easier to find. So what I was able to do back here on the controller is that if I wanted to go and find out, I can't just hit F12 on send and get to it. So doing the barbecue session command is the way that I can then do the go to references or, and then I'm right here at the command, and then I can see the command handler down here. And I guess I name them commands because I like CQRS. That's Command Query Responsibility Segregation. So if anyone's familiar with that, but in Mediator, it's all called requests. But what I like to put in is, if I look back here, you can see on the get all one, we are doing a query. See here, get all barbecue session query. And then what we did on the create was a command. And the idea with that is just, I found it better because I've worked at places where sometimes people have what looks like a get call that does some modification in the database, you know? And so by calling it a command and then having sometimes calling a query, it helps people kind of make sure that they're doing only reading data, they're only writing data and stuff like that too. So that's one of the things that I just get used to doing. Then, and with Mediator, what you're doing is that you're basically creating, and I do the record type in here, and that just made it a really simple thing, and it makes me feel better because I don't like seeing two classes in a same function. If I feel like it's a record, it's okay, right? But I don't know if that's true. but anyway, using the record with that command, you basically say that you have this interface of the I request, and then you say what your response is, and that's what if you have it. And then for our case that we're going to return this create BBQ session response DTO. The request handler has where you pass in, it's the generics here are you're using your create barbecue session command and then what your response is going to be. Then you can just do your dependency injection here in the constructor. And then your handle command is what you'd have, which has the command itself, or your handle method would have the create barbecue session command. And then I can have all my logic that was spread out before in a service class that had a whole bunch of methods in it. Now I have a single file with just the things that I'm doing as part of this command. And I think that's something that's pretty, powerful because of just having only the dependencies that I need in this method too, and then having just the code that's needed there. The other thing that you'll see is there's no validation part here. What we did is that the validator is here, and you can see this is an abstract validator for this create BBQ session command. And what fluent validation does is or when you do in here, we can do this command where you can say add validators from assembly. And what that does is we'll now go and look for any of those abstract validators. And then when it sees like a this certain command or query or something or a request come through, it'll automatically apply that validation before it hits the handler stuff. So that's pretty nice because now I can separate those and things like that.
Can you enlarge the text a little bit, please?
Sure.
Control.
I tried to increase it some, but I also tried the presentation mode, and it was just too hard for me to get to everything. So that better? Okay. I don't know how. And I can go larger if you need it there, but yeah, that was it.
I say bump it up one more.
One more. That's good.
Can everyone see it now? Because I said it's very fast. It's great to me.
How did you want? The other things that you see in here is that we added in mediator, and then you can register your services from the assembly again. And so we're just calling this is the application configuration thing, and again, the assembly. I want to show you this behavior that I added, and then this or request preprocessor too as well. But this is pretty easy. To add mediator, you really just have to go to NuGet, search for mediator. There's a package in here that says 12.2. It's really, really tiny probably for you guys, but just it's mediator. And all you have to do is add mediator, then add these services where you can say add mediator, and then you have to just register those from the assembly. That gets you all the requests and request handlers, or I call them the command and command handlers, or query and query handlers. But that gets those all added automatically. The only things it doesn't add are things called behaviors. That is a way to take mediator's pipeline. So like when you send a command, it goes through this pipeline, which then gets picked up by the handler. You can have behaviors that can kind of intercept that and do different functions. And so that's what I want to show you next. Then this is something that is pretty cool because we have these common behaviors, but what we can do is we can add a logging behavior. And this one, all it is it's a behavior, which is a iRequest preprocessor. And that means that before the handler gets called, it's going to call this behavior. And then what this will do is basically just say, get the request, get the user ID, and then log some information. And so what's nice is that every single command and query you have in here will automatically get this logging added. And so if you add a new one, you always have that logging. And so it's kind of nice that you don't have to have people go and put that logging into all their methods. And so like we said at the very beginning, if there was a prod problem and you're trying to figure out what's going on, that's a little late sometimes to add logging into your application. And so this is a nice way to make sure that you have some basic one and you can do whatever you want with it. There's another type of behavior that you can do in here, and this one is called a pipeline behavior. And what's different about this one is this one will execute some set of code, then call your handler, then execute some other code, right? So it's part of like more of the whole pipeline that goes there. So we can see down here, when it's doing it, it's saying start a timer, call the next thing in the chain, which is like our handler maybe, or it might be the logging or any of those things, right? And then we'll stop the timer. We'll check to see how much time has passed on this one. And then I just said 50 milliseconds for the purposes of here, but like whatever you have as a threshold in your business, maybe it's 2 minutes, I don't know, but it's something that you say, how long is it? And now you can log it. You could call a service like called Datadog or New Relic or something like that and send something to those things too, But it's just kind of nice that you can do this. And then this is in by default. So now every time someone adds a new set of functionality to your application, you can make sure that that is being properly checked for performance and notify the right people, or send a Slack message, send a Teams message, whatever, things like that. So it's pretty cool. And those were just added in once you created them. That's where we did this add behavior, and then we're going from this generic of pipeline behavior to this performance behavior. And then this one is the add request preprocessor. We're doing an iRequest preprocessor that goes to that logging behavior. So pretty easy to just make sure that that gets added in, and then you can use it all over the place. So that's pretty neat. Any questions about behaviors? Yes.
Are you concerned at all about the still pretty huge performance hit that this much request reflection points on your application?
I haven't ran into that, but maybe I haven't worked on those kind of levels of performance and applications yet, because it hasn't been a problem. I don't know. Have you seen it been an issue for you before?
We just stripped out of an application we're working on all reflection, all dependency injection, all of the modern
Wow.
toys, bells and whistles, and the application sped up so much.
Huh. Yeah, I haven't seen it. My general feeling is like I think of performance as a feature, because I think of developer productivity being like more important to me a lot of time than performance, unless there's really specific needs. And so I found that dependency injection still just makes my applications cleaner. There's things that I can do that, I'm not sure about your specific reflection cases, that if there was anything that was like more complicated than what we've done here. There are some libraries and some things that are happening in that I haven't seen Meteor itself go, but there's a branch, I can't remember the name of it right now, but where they were using source generators instead of reflection. And so that might be an option to try to make it go, because it's done at compile time instead of at runtime. But I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of, at least.
Is there more context on where you have performance issues? Well, I guess the project and then its performance needs.
The performance wasn't the point of the exercise.
Well, yeah.
The point of the exercise, and shameless plug, a presentation I gave, pushing it here we go by now, I guess. I absolutely hate dependency injection, will not use it, stand it out whenever I can find
Wow.
it. Yes.
All right.
Tell us how you really feel. As opposed to like, services and that stuff. Yeah. I can make a case.
So you like knew up everything, all the like.
Trust me, I have not yet begun.
That's all. That's all.
Sorry?
No, I would just like you knew up everything, like you don't.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep. That's how my code base works too.
Yeah.
Normally they'll have like business logic classes. They'll write in the controller, like in any controller endpoint, they'll just new up the business logic class.
Sure.
And they'll just run whatever function from the business logic class they'll use. And, I mean, to be fair though, I haven't really like come across code bases where dependency injection really does provide a ton of value.
Yeah.
Where I suppose precisely where like the way like to hide it behind like interfaces and whatnot, where it has become explicitly like been dealt with in that fashion, and it's like been a perfect solution, but still new.
I believe that there's there's no wrong way to write applications. There's only things that just can make your life easier or harder or anything like that, But I think it's whatever works in your particular case. I just found that like if you're trying to do testing and other stuff, dependency injection makes your life a lot easier. I think the code can be a lot cleaner. I've heard. I think it was Steve Smith. I think you said like new is glue, and it's just like means you're tightly coupling a lot of things sometimes, and that makes it tough to do some things.
Stacks in my career.
Yeah.
I always tell me your rules, not play by your rules.
There you go.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
I mean, only a set deals in absolutes.
Sure. Yep.
So
So whatever.
You can write bad code either way.
Oh yeah.
You can inject bad code.
You
can
can
do up bad code.
First coming out of college, I thought clean code was like absolute.
Mhm.
The code looks the best, absolute, not even close to the things. Yeah, it's like clean code is relative to whatever code base you're writing.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Like I can see the largest pile of garbage. Like, oh no, that's all right.
Oh yeah.
It's all right. It's totally fine. Like,
I always say every code base has like a story behind it,
yeah.
And I know I've worked at places where I'm not proud at all of what I wrote, but anyone has to know what I was going through then and who was yelling at me to get it done faster, like those things that change a lot, Yeah, exactly, right, and so.
Somebody who I talk to code writers all day long.
Yeah.
I have never had anybody say, "Oh yeah, I totally stand by that code I wrote 5 years
Oh
ago."
no, definitely not.
Okay, there is something I do hold like pretty strictly, but at least as far as my personal projects go. Do any of you like have like strict rules about how much you'll nest before you're like, ooh, I have to like change how this works, like not be this nesting at this level. Like you have like 4 indentation levels in, because you're like
I don't know about strict, but yeah, that I wouldn't go very far into it now.
And once you start realizing this is too deep, I mean, you should know.
Oh,
It's like, hold on. I know I'm gonna have to rewrite this at some point.
yeah.
Well, I should just get it done now and,
Yeah.
and save the headache. You know, I don't know, who was it, Steve Brown who said it? You know, I know you, I've said this photo 100 times, man. You know, you know, always write your code as if the guy maintaining your code is a homicidal maniac, and those were your right? And I find that, you know, if I can break it down where it's more readable,
Yeah.
in any way, shape, or form, I'll do it, yeah.
Yeah.
Every time I pull into my garage, I see that poster. Picture, I wanted to send people on my team.
One of the things that I do like about what Adam's showing with Mediator is that, you know, there's good decoupling. I think you're talking a little bit about events and some other things, notifications and so on, but, and how that gets separated. But I think a lot of us have probably all called into a business logic layer library that has, like, you know, 1,000 lines of code, and it has, you know, 40 different functions on it, or whatever it may be, right? And it's just kind of hard to work in those pieces. And I think just taking and saying, hey, not only do I have, you know, like a single use case that has essentially a single function to handle that does it, it makes you have a lot more files, for sure, but you trade that each one of those files has a more single responsibility, more single purpose. It doesn't, you know, you're not scrolling up and down as much, anything like that, and so it's much easier to work on. And then if you decide that, hey, this monolith application is really great, but I actually want to take these particular functions out, put them into a microservice or a different type of scalability, you know, it's really easy to say, hey, I want to take this one, this mediator query, this mediator command, and say, that's my candidate. It gets super hot, it gets called all the time, or it runs very long. I'm going to take that and slice it out. So having these architectures, I think, I don't know, I like how it starts to kind of break it apart a little bit more and make it a bit more approachable. Man, we've worked, I mean, y'all have worked on things that would,
Yeah.
when it's 3,000 lines or more, you're like, nah, I don't do it.
Well, I can't take in the entirety of that.
Yeah. Sometimes you have no choice. I
I
heard
know,
it's
yeah, it
code
is.
from the contractor, the consulting company they let go at the end of the year. There's so much stuff they started and never finished or didn't need anymore. It's like,
Everybody's got those stories.
I appreciate
That's
the
what-
discussion on Stefan as mediator here.
That's okay.
as a mediator.
Like,
This is fun, you know. I like it.
Handler.
You guys need handled, come on.
And to Nick's point, I think about the 10,000 line file. That's what we sort of had in a small case with that service class, right? Is that it's all combined in there. And one of the things that I like about using the use cases with mediator handlers and those things is having the idea that when you need to add new functionality, you create a new use case. It's a new set of files, a whole new section. So you're not modifying any of the existing files, existing code bases. And that's kind of sometimes can be a way to be like, and I don't know for you guys, but I know when I'm reviewing a PR, if I see all new files, I feel a lot better about merging that in sometimes even looking at it because I'm going, it's not touching anything, right? But if I see modifying some of these things, I go like, oh, this is our pricing logic. Better look at that really carefully, you know, and see what they've changed. And you never know what can happen. But anyway, that was one of those things I thought that really helped with using Mediator and stuff too. So.
I do actually have a question specifically about like log history. So when you're creating and deleting a bunch of files, like which this would lead you into, how do you think that would play out? Let's say you have like this app that's being maintained for like what 15 years, and you have a giant log history with a bunch of like final deletes and adds. Like, do you think that would be harder to track over a long period of time?
I don't know, because at least if I feel like that I'm getting it with new files and new things, that's not like 10,000 or 15 years of commits on the same file. That's like a lot to track, you know, I think. But I don't know. I think there's always trade-offs, and you know, it's hard to say for sure. I hope that like the idea is that we'd be building like as small of applications as we could, in a lot of places too.
Yeah.
And then in my experience, not many applications make it 15 years, but there's certain ones that do. But I don't, I know that we want to rewrite a lot. Yeah.
You shouldn't have 15-year durations in the system.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have 50 user revisions.
You shouldn't. Yeah.
Shouldn't.
Solid because just open closed. So if you're going to create a new version of an object, you create a new version of it. You don't just modify the core object.
Yes.
You create a new version, just like version endpoints in APIs. I have to explain that to one of my
Don't delete.
developers.
Don't delete.
Well, no, it's don't change the API version. So, okay, we have V1, some systems, they rely on this for the next 10 years. Create a V2 endpoint, it's okay. And you could call parts of the V1 code, that's not a problem. But it is the V2 endpoint, otherwise you're introducing version changes.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I'll have to get you to talk to my CTO.
Yeah, I had to explain version endpoints and I remember the day came that we needed it. Like it made sense. Like, oh, if we had changed this, we would have broken all the devices in the field. Like this is what we did. But, yeah, but it isn't until it becomes real that some people see it.
I mean, yeah, that does make less sense when my code. Well, I mean, that makes a lot of sense when you're publishing an API, because, yeah, my code is just a lot different. That's
I mean, it depends. Like you're again, every code base is different, right? It has a story. It's one saying, yeah. If you're working on a platform, which like you're in an organization, you should generally go towards the platform approach because then you have common code as best as you can.
Yeah.
Well, once you have a platform, you have core business objects. You can't just change core business objects without there being some sort of call out. So there's rules around that, and that's where versioning and every iteration of that comes in. Very important.
Okay.
I wanted to show you guys like another possible bug thing that that can happen and stuff. This is this update BBQ session command, and it's hard to see, it's tiny, but the last two parameters on here is user ID and tenant ID. But what you can see, and they're both GUIDs. And so in here I have the user ID, but I could actually go and change this to be the tenant ID, and it looks good. I can press tenant ID twice, and it looks good. But do that because the problem is that the tenant ID and the user ID are GUIDs, and you can just swap those. And no one would know until there was a bug when someone said, how come this data looks all wrong, right? And things like that. So what we can do is take something from domain-driven design, but something called value objects. So I created this record of tenant ID that you take in a GUID. And you take like a user ID and you take in a GUID, like that. And now what I can do is I can go to the command that I had there. That was the update BBQ session. I can go to this command, and then instead of saying that that's a GUID, now I can say it's a user ID and a tenant ID, right? And so now I have that as like a value object instead of being just a primitive, right? And now you can see that I have a red squiggly line on my session here. Did I do the right one? Yeah. So see here it's saying, that's not a tenant ID, that's supposed to be a user ID. So if I want to fix this, I just have to go and say user ID.
Do you use ReSharper?
This is Rider, and so it has ReSharper built in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think so.
And then when you're in that other class, couldn't you say refactor? Couldn't you control RR?
It's a different time.
Oh,
Did I do the wrong one? No.
Didn't we pass it a user or a tenant ID, not a user ID?
What's your input DTO property?
Oh, that's probably it. You're right. Thank you, Nick. Forgot about that. Because now it's expecting that. So if I go to
You actually delete your property.
Yeah, I need to change this one to user ID also, so that I have them. And now it's giving me disability lines on those. And so if I here, I can say I want to pass in a tenant ID, and it'll give me an error, right? And if I pass in a user ID, it just passes, right? And then I do the same thing down here. Not a user ID, but a tenant ID. So now it would actually get compile time errors and things like that. So it's kind of like a small thing, but handy to do and stuff. I don't have an example in the app of doing it, but I wanted to show you guys like another type of like thing you can do is like as a money object. And this is where we've had things before where we used, you know, decimal or something like that to keep track of money. And then all of a sudden someone says, you need to make sure that you have currency on it. You need to, you know, do certain things, right? So one of the things you can do is you can make a money type instead, and then give it some extra functionality. Like most of the stuff up here is just more about converting between money objects to deal with the amounts. So it's just helpers. But what we did on one of the projects was sometimes we wanted to show the dollar amount. Other times we wanted to obfuscate it. So we had XXX show up in there. And so this is something that when like for instance, in logging, we didn't necessarily want to have the money show up. So we had built it so that a logger would use the to obfuscated string. And so that's kind of a nice thing to do when you don't have just a decimal that you have to figure out how to get those out. So anyway, some good uses of these kind of value objects, sometimes a little simpler, sometimes a little more complex. But I like that a lot. So that's happy to share that one with you guys. Any questions about value objects? Thanks. Pretty straightforward, I think.
No, I just say that your examples are pretty simple ones, easy ones, but I know that I've seen some parameters with like 20, 30 parameters in there. And
oh yeah.
It adds in something. And it's like it is a lot more easy to make mistakes in that case.
Yep.
Probably a bigger refactor should be there, but you're like don't break it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, never find yourself in a function signature with 30 parameters in it. That should be a hint.
Yeah. They call it code stuff.
Yeah, a bit.
Yeah.
Would you believe that's my entire code?
Yeah,
At
tonight,
least
yeah.
it's in the architectural matters. It's like 20, probably the average.
Friends.
Yeah.
It's easy to make mistakes when the code base is like that. It really is. It's hard to be upset about it. It's like we gotta refactor this code.
And there's no map as to why they built it that way.
Oh, yeah, scope creep, they're documented.
Scope creep. I got asked once by a product manager, how much scope creep is acceptable? I said, none. And he goes, well, that's kind of, it's kind of, hard nosed or whatever. I go,
That wouldn't work, right?
anything you think is a little bit of scope creep is probably a lot of scope creep. It seems like one little change, but any scope creep that gets snuck in is something that you didn't check all the stakeholders about. So there was something you didn't know.
It's supposed to work like the spreadsheet was my
And
requirement.
the most expensive time to fix that is production.
Yeah.
Yep. The next thing I wanted to go through with you is using the notification concept in Mediator. This is what I use sometimes to try to make sure to handle for adding new functionality to a feature maybe, or to handle for side effects. But what it really is it's a, where we saw the I request type for Mediator was about saying I have a request and a request handler that has only one. Notifications are when you have a notification and you publish it, that can go to many different things. So it's like the concept of a message or a request versus a notification is just that like one-to-one versus one-to-many kind of things, or capable of one-to-many. And so let me show you an example of one of these. So I have in this create barbecue session, I have this events folder. And in here, what I did was I created a barbecue session created event. And so you can see here it's a iNotification type. That's a mediator type that it has. And it's just a naming convention where this was a command says create barbecue session. The notifications I like to use on these events are more barbecue session created. So one's saying do something, the other one's saying this happened, right? And so we have this, and then all I did on this one was just make a payload, which is the barbecue session, and just pass it in. So it's just taking the whole object, but you could put this to be very specific to what you cared about, like only certain fields or anything like that that was part of that session created event that mattered to you, you know. But then what you do is when you have this, then you can create these handlers. And so I have one here that says barbecue created email handler. And so the premise is like your product owner says, I want to get notified because I want to reach out to everyone who starts a barbecue session. I want to reach out to them. So send me an email whenever that happens. And you're like, okay, well, I could go into the command here and then add new code right into here. But then we're modifying existing code, adding some new requirements to do this. What we could do instead is just create this handler. And this is a iNotification handler for that event that we created, the barbecue session created event. And then it has a handle method. And then what you see here, we have this email service to send email. And so I'm sending it to the admin or whatever, and just a brief message and stuff that we're sending here. And all this is going to do, because it's using the dev email handler to log it. But it's kind of nice because now I was able to add that feature to be able to send an email without modifying any of the code from the core domain business rules. You know, and if I had another one that I needed to do, I would just add another handler file in here, like a new feature in the future. I can pick up that same created event and then add that new functionality on those things too. So, which is pretty interesting, I think. So, the way this one works, some of the other things to see. So if I go into the command, one thing that you'll see that we added differently here is that on this barbecue session, I did this add domain event, and this is a method I made, where we're passing in the session created event with this session. But what we're doing is we're taking it and putting that onto this method. And let me show you what that looks like. Because it's really simple. I did it on the base entity. So this is what all the entities use. And it had normally just the ID. But you create this list of domain events. And then we have these functions that say add domain event, which just goes to the domain event and adds that one in. But basically it puts it on this collection onto your whatever entity you're working with. And then what I did was I went into the data access part of this. If I go to the context and that save changes that we were at before. So now what we did was I did this, say, go get me the domain events, save changes, and then dispatch the domain events, okay? So what the getting the domain events does, go into here, this one's just making sure the context isn't null and all that. And then it goes to the chain tracker and looks for any of these base entity types, and then looks for any that have domain events, right? And then get the domain events into a list from those entities, and then loop through each one of these and clear them out now that I have them, because we don't need to save this to the database. That's not the intent. It's just there for a transport mechanism. But it's a way that I can now have the developers or whatever just add this domain event. They don't have to call the logic for publishing and all that kind of stuff. We can have this in one spot. But it gets these domain events out. Then, like we said, it saves changes. Then it goes to this dispatch domain events, which is right below in it. And this one just goes through and loops through all those events, which we may only have one. But you could have like more complex logic that has multiple things that are happening in this. And all of those we get together. And then all we're doing is mediator publish. And then what that publish does is actually sends that out to this handler. And so that can get picked up and ran and done this code. So pretty straightforward, you know, that's how it goes. But it's something I think makes it easy for the developer to use, because now we can go to every one of our different use cases if we want. And we can start publishing events in here too, you know, like add these events in to any one of these things if we wanted to, and then start capturing things like that on it. So one of the practices that we do when we use this sometimes is just put the events in for everything, and then even if you don't have a handler to do anything with it, because one day in the future you may, and so then you don't have to go and add that code into your main one. You just have it as a practice that everyone gets used to, and one of the things that's been kind of fun, like to use with it too, is it's a great way to. Anyone worked with SignalR before? Like that, a little bit, yeah. It's really cool. That's the ways that you can kind of have real-time communication between your clients and the server and everything like that, and using WebSockets and those kind of things. And but one of the things that's like kind of cool is you can use these domain events that I could actually make another handler here and actually have this thing go and talk to SignalR on the server side and say, send this data down to the client, tell it to refresh, tell it that here's some new data that you have. So it's a great way to have that as like a side effect essentially, and not have to have it be part of your main code again, because that's the point here, is that we're trying to keep this code That way over here, fairly simple, but by just adding in the domain event to that, now we can chain on a whole bunch of things after that. You know, so, yeah. No other changes, I think, having to happen to the configuration or anything like that. It's just because of that registering assemblies, it picks up the notifications and the notification handlers too. So.
Is there any work with like laser lock, but doesn't lasers like simulate connection?
Well, website, yeah.
Yeah, I guess in that case, the only problem I see at scale for that is if you run into like a socket issue. Yeah, you have a hard cap on your like sockets, and you have to scale up.
I don't know how hard. I know that wasn't a problem early on in SignalR, but I think that they addressed a lot of it. And I know like Azure has like a SignalR service and some other things that handles YS scaling if you needed it also. You know, so. But I think it's something to just be aware of. I think it's always good to do load and performance testing and other things on stuff anyway, you know, so it's a good point. But any good questions about notifications? Everyone see the value? I think it's pretty interesting as a, you know, capability, you know, there. Cool. All right. Depending on how much time we want to spend, I can either go and add more code to this, or we can go out for drinks. It's up to you guys, whatever.
I like both.
You like both?
Yeah, I like code and I like drinking good stuff.
I also could run it again if you need to, but it really should just have mostly the same functionality on this. Maybe. There you go.
Well, you found the line.
Can't bring it back here.
Yeah.
Can I get access to those project files by chance?
I don't have it up yet, but it's something I can like look, because I have like it's like I think it's very demo more than it is functional.
Yeah, if you send that to me, I'll make sure we get it onto the
Okay.
website.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay. Yeah.
Is all that available in there?
Not yet.
So that's what
But
he's
yeah.
talking about. I'll get that uploaded.
I'll at least do the final version or something like that
He
for you
said
guys.
he'll have it uploaded like in the next hour.
20 minutes. Yeah,
It doesn't take that long to do git add, you know. There you go.
Yeah, you gotta get it in before the button.
So, and I can go back because the only thing I thought we might do if you guys if you wanted to hang out longer is create another use case, create a handler, do all those things by hand, so we could just go through it one more time. But anyway, for anyone who wants to, we'll just go through some of what we went through at least today in here. So the idea is, we talked about forgetting to assign common properties and update cases. This is where we saw that save changes for Indy framework, where we added those audit properties. I think that's like a great way to make sure that happens, which is cool. Being lost in a new code base, that was that, organizing by type versus by use case. I think that could be also something that really helps people from being lost. Breaking existing code by adding a simple feature. And that's where sometimes like the request handlers can kind of isolate that code to being that one thing. If you have it inside one big file, you never know. Someone could modify the wrong thing or make a change that broke more of the methods and other stuff like that. So
I think it's also just less word complex.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. They definitely are sometimes. That stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Like we said, new functionality, new code. That's the premise on a lot of stuff. I like that a lot. Yes.
How does that relate to the smaller file then again?
It's that you have your handler is just one small file as opposed to being part of a big service file, maybe, right? Like if you have logic or service or something. I think there's still use cases even with these handlers to still have like cases where you're calling into some common code. So it's not like don't use services or anything like that. It's just less cases where you need it. I think is because it's all about refactoring and seeing where you see commonalities and start pulling things out to make it more maintainable and those kind of things. You can use, I guess I should make sure you guys are aware too, we use the notifications just in the handlers to send those, but you could publish those in other things. Same thing with the commands and the command handlers, or like a request and request handler. You can publish the commands anywhere. So hypothetically, instead of having it be an event that said, it was created, let me send an email, you could have just said, let's do a send email command, and then have another service pick that up and stuff like that too. So just how it works for you guys and stuff. I just am used to using it from like decoupling the front end from the logic. And I guess the other thing I want to say is like that what I like about it sometimes is if you think about the mediator handlers as being your like application code and your API just being an interface to that, right? You may have an API that says this is for my web client. This is my API for my mobile client. This is the API for my admin. They could even call all to the same command, and so you can publish the same command from all those. It just has to be the same application specific one. So if it's create user, it doesn't matter if it's on mobile, if it's on web, it might be the same command, but that allows you to make separate endpoints that, have their specific needs around authentication or, what the input looks like or anything like that, so, which I think is pretty cool. So anyway, just mediator I'm a fan of, so that's a big thing there. Adding logging during an outage is too late, right? So we talked about mediator behaviors and how that could be something. There is stuff too, just so you know, I mean, I'm sure you guys are aware too, in .NET there's request pipelines and middleware and stuff, so it's not like this is the only way to do this. You can do things with that too, but this is a good example of if you're using mediator anyway and stuff like that, that you could make sure that logging happens on every request and command that comes through. Saving data in the wrong field. This is where those value objects came in handy. So it can prevent bugs with primitives and things like that. So I think that's kind of handy to put in. And then complexity grows with new features. That's where we saw the notifications within Mediator. That allows us to decouple, handle for side effects, things like that. I still believe you want to try to handle a lot of the core logic to whatever that particular use case is. But when you start seeing things that are extras, that's really been super handy for me. So, and I wrote down here at the bottom, these are just some ideas, use this as inspiration to, for ways to solve challenges in your organization and what it faces, because these aren't all the problems you'll see and things like that. I know there's plenty more and stuff, but I think the thing I try to encourage is that when you find bugs, when you find things, think about the architecture, think about how we could prevent the bug. There's things like people say, right, unit tests and things like that, and that's great. But also think about how you can solve it with architecture, and see if there's opportunities just to make your developers more successful by helping them by doing the things that make their lives easier. I know we were talking earlier about how you're seeing that benefit in your organization and stuff, too. So, which is great. So, so questions on anything of this? This is my QR code for LinkedIn if anyone wants to, connect me. Yes.
You said, I know you briefly went over like a repository. What exactly is that?
It's like a abstraction around your database and stuff. So like the premise being in some of these is that you may want to like go from going on SQL Server to Postgres or something like that. With things like using Indy framework, it becomes less of an issue because you're just programming against Indy framework. And that those things, like we've done it before and a lot of things where you can change it. I find it most helpful when you're trying to do like certain kinds of testing and you want to like not have to use an in-memory database. You can actually then mock your repository and then fake those calls and things like that. That's where I've seen it. A lot of people find like there's different use cases and some just prefer that level of abstraction, but it's just abstracting away the actual calls to the, like, I guess if I go into the code.
You know what that pattern was designed with? Were they just making like raw?
The ones I've seen, because like I'm old, and so going back to like the days, it was like you actually wrote SQL, you actually wrote, or you're using data tables or like something like that. There's stored procedures. There's a lot of things that are like they're different than any framework does for you.
You didn't have to do it is that the repository is what's on top of your data store. So
Yeah.
You send it to your repository, your storage repository, your information.
Yeah, like this isn't the best example of where to use one, but because you have things like adding, and now it does the code for you to do the add. And so if you had to add any functionality to the add, or you need to change it out, you don't have to change all your application code. That's the idea. Yeah.
Sorry to take just a little more time. Is it localized to one table on your database? Like one repository?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Definitely doesn't have to be.
But yeah, that's all.
This one we have repositories for each, but they're We're just using the generics. So you see like this extends the base repository and passes in that BBQ session as the entity. And then in here, you see how it just expects that T entity for the base repository. And then all these methods in here expect they're going to get that same, like in the case of the barbecue session, it would get passed there, you know?
Yeah.
So.
I have a little bit more of an audience polling question, if that's okay.
Mhm.
So just how many folks here are using entity framework? So Dapper or
So on my team, we actually, we started off with Dapper. We realized that entity
Just
framework
in line
makes more
with thinking.
sense.
Great presentation.
We're in the process of switching, but we've also found that there are some cases where Dapper is still the better choice. So we actually have both.
Okay.
So talking about repository pattern,
Yep.
we have a single interface repository that under the hood, in some cases is doing entity
Yep.
framework, in some cases is doing Dapper.
Yeah, that's good.
They're doing any firm from posts and puts, they're doing that for all the kids.
Oh, okay. And those were against the same database or different data sources?
Same database.
Okay. Yeah. So not, sometimes we'll see a separation between the read database and the write centric database. So here between. And then the other question I was going to ask is, event, like how many folks are doing things heavily with events? You know, Mediator is pretty heavy on events. Yeah, that does not know events. Yeah.
And used to solve completely different problems, but yes.
With those events, like we do a lot of stuff that's like outside of the four walls of this application. It'd be maybe like, let's go publish to SQS or to, some service bus or something like that. Is that what you guys do as well? Yes. Yes. I looked at Meteor when Adam first showed me it several years ago, and the notification piece I thought was kind of fun for the effect that when I could decouple some things and I could say, yeah, all the advantages of what you said. The other one that I liked a lot was using that to create a handler to like SQS, or just an internal event publisher. So I could say, hey, let me break out, like this is good for my application, my domain I'm playing with, but I really need this to happen over here to go back to your ERP system or go back to some other things. And so like, and I don't want that to actually run on this Foxy, but I want it to be a Lambda that someone spins up or some other system. And so having a little SQS proxy to take the event notification, send the event to SQS, have that trigger. Was kind of a cool like add-on. It also helped us get from some of our folks to go from monolith to slice down microservices when it made sense to do.
And the nice thing about doing that is it makes your application so resilient that, I tell people as soon as the message hits the bus, success is guaranteed. And get blank looks every time, which is why I say it like that, because it's kind of funny to me. But I tell people when the message hits the message bus, one of three things is going to happen. It's going to work, in which case it worked. It's going to encounter a temporary error that retries will take care of, and therefore it works. Or it's going to fail because of a permanent failure, in which case the message goes to an error queue. Somebody gets notified of it, and because it's your business model to do this thing, you go fix that, and then replay the message, and the message succeeds, and success is guaranteed.
Yeah.
But
Except that I go to almost any one of our clients and say, have you touched the DLQ? And they're like, oh yeah.
well, if you're not paying attention to those notifications, then you're probably not paying attention to to any other exception notification.
Ones that are hot at the moment.
I do have a question about that stack in particular I'm working on. Does the stuff you send out like do a bunch of other effects, right? After those are done, does it change your like internal state that's like going on like in your application? Like after they're done doing their stuff, I guess.
I guess it all depends on what your event handler is doing. You should probably be pretty careful you don't get into a circular loop of changing things, But state, I think, is a broad term, right? Like if it was, as an example, I created an order and now I had some like inventory thing to wake up and say, oh, an order was created. I'm going to actually go check my threshold and see if I need to reorder future stock or something like that. Right?
Okay.
That would be, I think, I mean, I just made it up on the fly, but I think that would be like a perfectly acceptable change of state. But you may not want to say, I changed the order, which kicked off an event header that changed the order, which kicked off an event header that changed it. You know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That would be a problem, you know, or potentially a problem.
Maybe you really want that to happen, who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Paid by the execution invocation.
Some client hires you and says, I want something that just calls itself endlessly.
Yeah, wild true.
I love infinite loops are beautiful.
Elegance in it, right?
Mm.
I want to heat my house by the CPU.
Yes, yeah.
It's almost kind of, yeah,
Wait,
it almost
we're talking
kind of
about
reminds me of
Broadbent?
Remix, like, a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Your code looks like an Usher print.
Yeah, just like the effect handling this.
Yep.
But yeah, if you had a, I wish there was like a way you could like globally define like a whole state across like several systems with that. And then you could do like some kind of Redux thing across that entire thing. But
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you can't do
I
that.
have a question for you.
Yeah.
Just,
it is a database.
Well, there's also state services.
Yeah,
You know?
state machine.
Yeah.
I have a
But like
question
with
for you.
less like network layers. Yes.
Well, I mean, if you're going to do it, if you're going to share it across machines, the network's involved.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the long and short of it.
So you refer to yourself as a junior recruiter, or junior,
Yeah.
because, is that just because you're at 2 years?
I'm almost at 2 years.
Okay, the questions that you are asking would lead me to believe that you have a better knowledge base than 2 years. So I would challenge you to let go of that mindset. Because you are probably holding yourself back some.
I agree with Nikki.
Well, I agree in the case that, well, I have a better vocab, but like when it comes to action, it's different. That's a whole different story.
Okay, but that's a learning curve.
Sure.
Everybody
Talk-
has
talk's
one, no
half
matter
of it,
where they're
right?
at. that curve.
Yeah, talk and talk.
I guess, yeah, I suppose that's fair,
I-
yeah.
What I'm hearing from you, and if I were interviewing, is that I'm hearing a lot more potential than I would from a junior. So
You probably have a lot
get past
less
that
interviews than I've had in my career.
Maybe.
mindset.
oh, cool.
Well, thank you so
Well, gosh,
much.
thanks, Adam.
Real quick notes first, there is still pizza, so make sure that disappears. We have 5 spots left this year for speakers, so if anybody wants to together.
I added one.
Got one in the room? Perfect. Shoot me an email on that second.
I already put it up
Okay,
June.
for June. It's the one I already told you about.
Perfect.
I always get 2 emails.
I'll put you in.
I didn't write meetup.
Okay.
I'm like, oh man, I better suck.
There's a spreadsheet
Oh, okay. Got it.
for-
And we should probably stop recording.
Next
Any
one.
questions?
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all very much.
The speaker will be Matt, doing a talk on being your own contractor. So I encourage you guys to come.
What's the next one?
Next month.
Cool.
And after I get stuff cleaned up here, I'll be heading over to Drake. So if anybody wants to join.
Are we going to Drake's?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Drake.
Drake's for Drake's.
Because I was talking, and I got to decide because I was talking.
Whoa.
She made the
Fine.
call.
Fine. Okay.
Is that the whiskey place?
It's right behind District Tab.
No, that's Blend.
It's right behind
Blend's the
District
cigar bar. Drake's is the place that, it's a burger and sushi joint.
Oh, that's across the street.
Yeah,
Tab.
that's what I call them.
District Tab.
Yeah, just across the bridge.
Cool.
District Tap tends, a lot of times, moving into the summer, they'll have live music, so that makes it very difficult for conversation. And
That was
I,
just a ton of
and I found that Blend, if you have more than 8 people, they
Yeah.
want to do one tab. So,
Yeah.
Well, isn't Theris paying?
no,
Oh,
Paris pays for your pizza and
That's
the
nice.
room.
why not pizza and drinks?
All right.
Thanks, Theris.
Thanks for the pizza.
Can we pitch that?